Hi everyone, my name is Sally Fowler. I'm the owner and trainer for Disabled Advantage. Thank you for joining me on my Patreon tier, Service Dog Questions Answered. In today's question, I will be answering what types of gear does my service dog need? And I'd like to start out this question by defining the word gear, because everybody uses different words when they're talking about service dogs, and so it can get a little confusing. And especially if you follow my stuff or if you have conversations with me one-on-one, I sometimes say tack instead of gear, and that's a holdover from me riding horses for most of my life. For the purposes of this post and most of what I teach about service dogs, I use the word gear as equipment that your dog wears daily or for off-duty or for work. And then breaking away from gear, you also have work-related equipment and life-related equipment. So gear are things like leashes and collars and harnesses and vests, whereas work equipment would be things like pull tabs or ropes that are hanging on doors in your home or on cabinets and drawers, things for your dog to grab. If your dog needs little keychain tabs on various retrieve items, that's work equipment. If you have pouches that your medicine lives in, that your dog retrieves the pouch, that's work equipment. My dog has a cart for pulling firewood. That's work equipment, not so much gear. And then you have life equipment, and life equipment are things like bowls and your dog's go bag and a treadmill if you have one, or travel bowls and placemats and things like that, things that are in your life. So in regard to this particular question, we're going to be talking about gear being anything that your dog wears on a daily basis, anything they wear for free time or off-duty time, and anything that they wear specific to their job when they go out in public with you, or that they need to be wearing on their body for a specific task, like a specific type of harness for counterbalance assistance would be an example of that. So what gear do you need though? I don't know. What service dog do you have? If you have an alert dog, your gear might be incredibly simple. Leash, collar, boots, vest that identifies the dog. If you have a mobility dog, the gear tends to be more complicated because depending on what type of mobility assistance you need, there are very specific harnesses for that job that your dog needs to wear. But they may not be able to wear that harness in the car because it's not also a crash harness most of the time. And so then you need a different type of gear for that different scenario. When we're talking about gear for your service dog, it's going to change depending on what type of service dog you have and what type of service dog you need. If you are a brand new handler and you're just getting started and you're just trying to get the bare minimum, you need a training collar. That's a collar that applies pressure and release to communicate with the dog. You're looking at slip collars, martingale collars, prong collars. Okay. You need a leash, either a 4-foot or a 6-foot. 6 feet is a lot of leash. 4-foot is generally more comfortable. And you need some sort of identifier, be it a leash wrap, that is something that hangs on your leash that says, hey, this is a service dog, or hey, this is a service dog in training, or a bandana. And those are what you start out with. And then you get into training your dog, you get into working with your dog, and you go, actually, I don't like a bandana. It scrunches up. You can't see it. I want a cape. That's a very simple type of vest, maybe a pocket. That's about it. Not really used for heavy work, it's just an identifier. Or maybe I do need a harness, and you build from there based on your particular situation and your particular scenario. When we're talking about gear, this could include leashes, collars, vests, harnesses. That might be a car safety harness, a counterbalance harness, a guide harness. Safety, orange for safety, reflective gear for at night, or if your dog is black, safety goggles, or ear protection if you work somewhere or you have an activity that's really loud and you want to protect your dog's hearing. Boots. Boots are good for hot pavement, ice melt, muddy days, rainy days, ice. A muzzle. And this one sounds a little weird for a service dog because no, your service dog is not allowed to be aggressive or reactive. So ideally, you shouldn't need a muzzle at all. But I actually do recommend that service dog teams desensitize their dogs to wearing muzzles so that in the event of an emergency, if somebody tries to put a muzzle on your dog for their own safety, like an emergency worker needs to put in a muzzle on a dog before they pick it up after a car accident, it's a safety thing for them. We want to make sure that your dog's not going to flip out about it. So it's not an everyday piece of gear. It's not a piece of gear your service dog should need, but it is a good piece of gear to make sure your dog is comfortable wearing, just in case somebody ever tries to put one on. Bandana. Bandanas are great for early training or if you're waiting for your gear to show up. They're also a smaller safety feature if you get an orange bandana with a little bit of reflective on it. Coats. Coats are very area dependent. If you live in nice Southern California, your dog doesn't need a winter coat. Okay. But if you live someplace where it rains a lot, your dog might need a raincoat. In Missouri, our first dog had short hair. And so he needed a winter coat. He needed a light winter coat for days when it was like 40, 50. And then he needed a heavy winter coat for days when it was 2. He also had a raincoat for days when it was 80 degrees and raining. But most of the time he could get by wearing his light winter coat on rainy days. He also had boots because we have mud and salt and ice melt and hot pavement and just everything. We also often had him wearing boots anytime I was admitted to the hospital as an extra safety precaution for him. My second dog is part husky. He does not need a winter coat, so he doesn't have one. We did buy him a raincoat. He hates it, so he rarely ever wears it. We just carry a small hand towel with us, and we dry him off as needed. So some of this equipment is going to vary depending on where you live and what your personal preferences are. I do recommend an e-collar, and the reason for that is that it's a great way to communicate with your dog when they're off leash. It's a great backup method for reinforcing behaviors that you've trained your dog. And I really like it as a nonverbal way to communicate with my dog. When I go on off-leash walks with my dog, which I realize is not going to be the everyday or every case scenario for most service dog teams, but I do live in a place where I can take off-leash walks with my dog, and I am at a point with my disability where I can on some days. And I trained the vibrate button on our e-collar to mean I need help, please come back quickly, because I am not always able to verbalize that. And so that's been immensely helpful for us. A bark collar might be necessary. It might be something that you need in the very beginning to help cut down on your dog's barking, and then it doesn't become a problem. Service dogs should not have reactive behaviors like barking incessantly at various noises or people passing by your house. But if you get a shelter dog, you may have to smooth out some of those rougher edges. We got a bark collar for Austin because he had a tendency to husky sass. And I have part of my disability is sensory. And so we needed to teach him that he was not allowed to bark in our house. And it wasn't obsessive, it wasn't reactive. It was just he would sometimes get frustrated or too excited and he would let it out by barking. And we needed to teach him that one, that wasn't okay, and two, a different way to channel that energy, which we were able to do, but the bark collar helped tremendously with that. And you might decide that you want a pack to help. Carrying weights on a walk can tire your dog out more. It also builds up muscle and stamina and endurance when done correctly. And it can mean that you take shorter walks with your dog and your dog still gets the same value from it. So it's a little bit of a break on you. Packs are also really great for service dogs because you can teach them to carry various equipment that you might need on a day-to-day basis or for special outings. My first service dog would carry a pack on walks sometimes if I wanted to walk to a local conservation area and take photographs. He would carry my camera for me, and that spared me the energy drain of me carrying it myself and gave me the energy to actually be able to take photos and hold my camera without shaking. Other dogs might need a pack to carry oxygen tanks or emergency medical equipment, a flare kit, and various things like that. Depending on where you live and how well your dog is built, you may also need a cooling vest. These are vests that you dunk in water and you squeeze them out and then you put them on your dog, and it helps cool off your dog with evaporative cooling. My friend has a black dog, and she's found this to help tremendously with preventing heat stroke in the summertime. And where he used to get overheated and really tuckered out within a short amount of time during the summer, he's now able to be out longer and more safely because he has this cooling vest now. So it's not a cure-all, but it is a definite benefit if you live somewhere that gets really hot. Since I specialize in training mobility dogs, my recommendation, I do have a list of my recommended equipment for somebody who has a large breed mobility dog. I recommend having at least one 4-foot leash. 4-foot leash is a good starting size to give yourself an idea of what amount of leash you like handling. It might be that you find yourself always folding it up and you think, hey, I think I want to switch to a 1 or a 2-foot leash for working in public. You want to have at least one 4-foot leash though, because that's going to be what you use for going in public and working with your dog. It's going to be what you use for your fun daily walks. It's going to be what you use for your structured walks. It's going to be what you use in the house as a house leash when you're first introducing your dog to your home. It's going to be what you use when your dog gets stuck in a training exercise and you need to guide them through the steps. So it's really, really important to have a leash that's extremely versatile and that your dog is comfortable being on both inside your house and outside your house and on the job and off the job. I also recommend having a 15-foot leash. The reason for that is that it's a great way to teach fetch. It's a great way to start your dog learning how to play in your yard and respect your yard boundaries. And when you travel, having a 15-foot leash is a great way to give your dog a little bit of extra playing area and room to stretch their legs and wander about when you stop at rest stops or nature overlooks to let your dog kind of relax in between car rides. I do recommend a hands-free leash for mobility teams, and I only recommend a hands-free leash once your dog is fully trained and knows how to walk on leash and knows how to heel with you. Hands-free is a great option for teams, especially who have hand dexterity problems. You can clip the leash to your waist and the dog is right there. They're easily accessible. They have their downsides. First of all, that it's then clipped to you, and so it can make navigating with the dog a little harder every time you sit down, or if you need to move to the floor, or if your dog tries to move around you. So it limits all of that. But just for basic daily walks for fun or basic town days, it can be a really useful tool to free up your hands to do other things. I recommend either having a slip collar or a prong collar for communicating with your dog. And I actually recommend a prong collar over a slip collar for most teams because it doesn't take very much pressure to communicate with your dog using a prong collar. So it's really great for people who have weak hands. I do recommend an e-collar, like I mentioned before. It has many benefits. When it's used properly, it can be an tremendous asset to your team. You'll need some type of vest, or if you need counterbalance assistance, some type of vest counterbalance combination. You don't need a harness to brace on your dog, but some people prefer it. You're supposed to brace on the dog's shoulders because that's where most of their load-bearing capacity is. I don't put gear on my dog at home. He most of the time works naked, and so he's very used to me bracing on his shoulders without him wearing a specific harness to do it. But if your dog is just a little short or bracing on their shoulders is uncomfortable for you, you will need a harness with a rigid handle that is shorter than 5 inches tall to brace on the handle. I also can't brace on handles because my wrists break over and do weird things. So bracing on the shoulder is safer for me. You do not want a handle that sits at an angle to the dog, the way guide dog harnesses are, because those will put too much torque on the dog and can seriously hurt your dog if you try and brace on that type of harness. There are some harnesses that the handle lays flat and then it moves into a rigid upright position and locks, so that might be an option, but you still don't want anything taller than 5 inches because at that point you're still putting too much torque on your dog and your dog is too short to be doing the work that you're asking of it. Counterbalance harnesses, if you're bracing on it, you need a rigid handle unless you're bracing on the vest itself, in which case you're still just bracing on the dog's shoulders. You could also have some handles are perpendicular to the dog and others run along their spine. There's not one that is better than the other. Honestly, it comes down to what feels best to you. Austin's harness is soft all the way. We added a counterbalance strap to it so that I can hold on to that to kind of center myself and balance myself out when we're walking. But then when I need to brace, I still just put my hand on his shoulders instead of on a rigid handle. So the soft handles are more for pulling assistance and counterbalance assistance, guiding short places, and forward assistance. So forward assistance is when the dog helps you continue to move forward. Some people do that by holding on to a soft handle. I do it by clipping a longer leash to a D-ring on my dog's harness, and then they're usually several feet in front of me. That's most of the time done on really long walks that I take at home by myself. or on windy days. If I'm doing that out in public, I use a much shorter leash, about 1 to 2 feet, but that is still clipped to the dog's harness, so it feels a little bit different than me holding on to the counterbalance strap. So you'll have to figure out what types of tasks you need your mobility dog to do, and then what gear you want to use to meet that objective. And there's a lot of different places where you can buy gear. And another option is to look on Facebook and join groups for gear donation and gear trading between teams. And also just ask another handler what they use and what they've found worked or didn't work, especially if you guys have the same medical condition. It may not be the same, even if you guys do have the same medical condition, but it's a jumping off point and it's a place to ask questions. I do recommend having some sort of off-duty safety vest with a patch on it that says service dog on it. We have a orange safety vest that my dogs wear during deer season and also when they have off-leash field walks. But it's also something I have them wear at the park so that our state gives us legal protection. There are various, it is considered a crime to interfere with a service dog or attack a service dog or let your dog attack a service dog. And so for that reason, we always try to keep our dogs labeled clearly as a service dog if we're going to be someplace where there might be other dogs. And it's not, they know they're not on duty, but it's more so that if somebody comes up to us and like pulls a knife on my dog and they're clearly labeled as a service dog, we have some sort of legal recourse on our side because he was clearly labeled as a service dog. I recommend a car harness or a crate for safety in the car, because you are spending so much time investing your time and your energy and your money into this dog who is your medical equipment. It makes sense to protect them in the car as best as you can. I like using a car harness because it gives us more flexibility when I travel with different people. And they don't really make car crates for really, really large dogs. We use the same work harness and car harness. Robbie's work harness was actually designed around his car harness so that we could do that. And it cut down on gear changes for us. But gear changes are an inevitable facet of service dog life. And so that's something to consider as well. What's easier for you, taking your dog out of a crate and putting on their work gear, or taking off their car harness and putting on their work gear and then taking that off and putting on their car harness? So that's a consideration. I recommend some type of Y harness for off-duty walks so that if you start to have trouble with your balance, you can clip your leash to your Y harness, assuming you have trained your dog and prepared them for it, and they can provide quick counterbalance or forward assist on the go, even if you weren't expecting to need assistance on your walk. Again, that is considering that you have trained that task and that the dog understands what you are asking them to do. Don't just assume that if you clip a leash on a Y harness, your dog is going to do the right thing. And then boots. Even if you don't live somewhere where the pavement doesn't get hot or you don't have snow and ice melt, you are still a person with a medical condition, and at the bare minimum, it's a good idea to consider having your dog wear boots in medical places, hospitals, and doctor's offices, because you just don't know what's on the floor, and it's a good safety precaution. It can also help limit if your dog slips on the slicker floors. And that's the bare minimum of my recommendation for mobility gear. But like I said, it's important to keep in mind that what gear you use with your dog is going to vary based on what you like, what your preference is, what you need in a day. And there's going to be work gear, like their vest that they wear out in public, but then the gear that you use for their fun walks or their daily walks or adventure hikes that you guys take together, that might be the same leash and the same collar, but just no service dog vest. Or it might be a completely different leash and collar, but it's still gear that you need for your service dog. If you need help finding gear or finding gear that's appropriate for what you're looking to do with your dog or gear that you can afford, I encourage you to set up either a free consult with me or a coaching session if you're looking for more in-depth help on selecting gear for your dog and preparing for what gear you might need before you bring a service dog home. Thank you for listening to this question: what type of gear does my service dog need?